Welcome to the Philocrosophy Podcast, where host and lacrosse expert Jamie Monroe will do what he does best, talk about lacrosse. Each episode will provide listeners with education, insights, stories, and lessons about the lacrosse world. We will discuss current events, coaching, philosophies, and college lacrosse recruiting. Now let's get started with your host, Jamie Monroe.
How's it going, everybody? Really excited to welcome Hannah Nielsen to the Philocrosophy Podcast. Hannah is the head lacrosse coach at the University of Michigan, one of the great all-time women's lacrosse players, played at Northwestern, won 4 national championships, was a 2-time Tewaaraton Award winner, grew up in Australia and coached at Colorado, then back at Northwestern, and then became the head coach a couple of years ago. Hannah, welcome to the show. So fired up to talk lacrosse with you.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
The Philocrosophy Podcast is brought to you in part by the JM3 Coaches Training Program. If you are a coach interested in sharpening your saw, like so many of the guests on the show, you are going to love the content in this program. Go to www.jm3coaches.com for more information.
Awesome. So, okay, we were just talking a second ago about, you've been listening to some of the podcasts, and in particular, the free play, and you said it reminded you of growing up at home. Tell me about your experience in Australia, growing up in Adelaide, playing lacrosse, who you looked up to, how you got so good, and what the model was.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of what I learned, I think, and made me so successful was my upbringing, not only on the field, but I think just the laid-back attitude I have. Growing up at home, you only play lacrosse if you're born into a lacrosse family or you happen to meet somebody who's played lacrosse. That's how I stumbled into it. I played tennis with a girl who played lacrosse, and I got into it that way. And once you play back home, people just have a love for it. And once, we grew up, and I would spend, my days, Tuesday nights, Thursday nights were training nights, and then Saturdays were game days. And, as a young kid, I was playing, under 13s, under 15s, under 17s, and then in the seniors, as a 13-year-old. And so, I grew up just with a stick in my hand, and after our senior game or after our under 17 game, we'd go and watch the men's team, the men's senior team, and we'd go sit around at the lacrosse club with a stick in our hand. And at the quarter time and halftime, we'd run out onto the field and, play halftime heroes, just chucking the ball around and shooting on the nets, just mocking up fake 1v1s with some of the other, young guys. So it was a constant just having the stick in your hand. Not necessarily being coached 24/7 and doing lessons, kind of like the mold is here these days, but just kind of figuring it out for yourself. Obviously, there were set and organized training sessions, but even a lot of those were just here, take an idea and run with it and just go play. And so, as I was telling you earlier, I was listening to some of that free play stuff, and I texted my counterpart assistant coach, who's also an Aussie. I was like, you should listen to this. It reminds me of home. I can vividly remember in high school, calling up one of my guy friends and just playing lacrosse in the backyard, putting on men's pads and just kind of going at each other. And just, I used to watch the guys play and try and emulate them, just with the stick handling ability and their shooting technique. And, as I said, I grew up around the lacrosse club, whether it's watching 3 games a day or playing 3 games a day and emulating the senior players that I was playing against. As a 13-year-old, you're getting beat up, but at the same time, you're like, whoa, that was awesome. As you get yourself up off the ground and, just watching and emulating. And then, as I said, just picking up a stick any chance you got any chance you had, I think really just helped me to just learn the nuances of the game.
When you were 13 and you were playing 13s and 15s and 17s and 19s and women's and all that, but you kept playing your 13s too, right? So you played all the levels. That's kind of like the underloading, overloading concept, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think absolutely at the time, the under 13 seemed really easy to me. And I thought about stopping, but at the same time, twofold, it was, help out your team. They need you. So absolutely, my dad would never let me not play the age group that I was, actually supposed to be in. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It teaches you even more all right, I'm just going to try this because I know I can do it against this level player. And then in the under 17s, maybe I wasn't so confident to try it. But as you get better and better, absolutely, I was listening to that, and it's directly a correlation.
Who were your mentors in Australia, and the people you looked up to, and like who taught you the kind of world-class skill that you got? I mean, I know you got better in college, but you came in with a certain amount of skill also.
Yeah, it's most people would know in women's lacrosse the name Jen Adams, and I actually got taught by her sister, Trish Adams, who's she's coached a lot of Australian teams over the years, and vividly remember her teaching me how to catch and throw. Vividly remember when I was an under 13, one practice, it wasn't on field, it was in the classroom. Okay, or not in the classroom, in the club room, I should say. Draw an 8 meter and draw the hash marks. And I had no idea. That was my first couple of years of playing lacrosse. It was actually like a homework assignment. She's like, come back next week with the 8 meter drawn out. I'm like, and I got it completely wrong, but she taught us a lot about game strategy and what to do when you're goal up, goal down, things like that. But yeah, at the same time, the skills I learned were taught by her. A guy named Tim Dickson at home, he was he's been on the men's Australian team, coached men's lacrosse, and came over to the women's side. So I learned a lot of things to do with, picking and flipping and gameplay and shooting and finishing ability from him and a guy named Paul Freeman. And as I said, from there, it was watching a lot of lacrosse for me, watching the men play and their stick handling ability, and honestly, watching players like Jen Adams whenever I could find, I remember watching a Maryland highlight video when I was a kid, and that was when I decided I want to do that. And I'll never forget, there was a shot in that video, Jen Adams, caught the ball in the middle of the 8, kind of backhanded it into the cage, and I would go out. We had a tree in my front yard, and I'd pretend that was the defender, and I'd be practicing that move over and over and over again. So for me, it was a lot of emulation and watching the best players and try and copy them.
Very cool. And what was the lacrosse season? When was the season in Australia? It sort of finished up in August, started up?
Yeah, it typically runs sort of early April to early September, late August, early September, yeah.
And then what did you do? What were you doing between, October and through March?
I played a lot of sports, and I'm a big advocate for, multi-sport athletes. I played tennis. I played Aussie rules football with the boys. I played cricket. I played soccer. I swam. I did, surf lifesaving, all these different sports, which I think, kept me active and competitive. So, all summer long, I'd be on the beach or on a different surface playing a different game, which just kind of kept me sharp and alert. And I think I was just out on the field before this podcast doing an individual with someone, and I referenced something about water polo and I referenced something about volleyball. Two sports you might not have any correlation to lacrosse, but I think just knowing different games and being able to reference different things and how they're significant to each other has really helped me. Things like angles and ball trajectory in tennis, has really helped me on the center circle, getting draws, going up for the ball, being able to track the ball into my stick, whether it's short or going over my head or reading a bounce or things like that. So, there's certainly, I was keeping busy year round. I
have a theory that we all talk about multi-sport athletes, and that there's a crossover, and there's no dispute for me on that. But I actually think there might be a bigger impact if you were a multi-sport athlete and at least one of those other sports was more unstructured and pickup rather than structured. Because I feel like the actual unstructured piece is where you gain this fluency.
Yeah.
And I think that my question to you as it relates to that is, of all these other sports, what percentage was just you playing with friends and just playing the game rather than, learning how to hit a volleyball exactly the right way and all
yeah. 100% agree with you. All growing up, I was playing footy, as I referenced, Aussie rules football. And I was, my dad kind of taught me to play at a young age, and every single lunchtime through, we call it primary school, so that's kind of 3rd grade to 7th grade, every single lunchtime I was out playing with the boys, and there was no referee, there was no no one mandating or teaching us how to do it. We'd watch the professionals on the weekend, and you go out and have a kick with your dad or your mom or whoever, family members, and then you go and you just play and you figure it out. And you'd be able to read when was an appropriate time to do a give and go, or how to pick up a weird shaped ball from the ground, and 100%. And that's one sport, but at the same time you're learning teamwork, you're learning communication, you're learning aggressiveness, all of it. And absolutely just doing that from a young age. Again, every chance I got, I was doing something. And I would say at least 75% of the time it was
unstructured,
on my own. Yeah, unstructured.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, all right, so you ended up at Northwestern. Surprising you didn't get recruited to go to Maryland, or that you didn't go there and follow in Jen.
Well, I did. I chose not to when it came down to it.
So how did that, tell me real quick, how did you end up at Northwestern? Because I want to hear more about that, but just a little bit about how you ended up there.
Yeah. So I was getting recruited, by a bunch of different schools. It really worked out in my favor that the 2005 World Cup was in Annapolis. So as a 17-year-old, I was playing in that, and that was perfect timing for me to visit some of these schools. Had I not had the opportunity to do that, I probably would have ended up at Maryland. That was where I thought I was going to go from 7th grade. And, I had the opportunity to visit Northwestern, and went on an official visit with my mom and dad. And, when it came down to it, a couple of reasons, wanted to do something different. A lot of Aussies had been to Maryland, and I really just believed in Kelly and her philosophy and what her vision for the program was. They had just won their first national championship. You could hear it in her voice when she spoke that she, was passionate about it, and had big things in mind for the program. And, I was just really impressed with the facilities. And, as a young kid, it was less for me about the school. In all honesty, it was more just about lacrosse. And I just believed that was a place I could go and be individually successful, and, win championships, which was the ultimate goal of mine.
Which you did. So, lacrosse, what was it like playing for Kelly? You got a chance to coach with her years later, but what was the program like at that time? I mean, you guys won 4 championships.
Yeah.
What was lacrosse in general like? I feel like there's been a lot of evolution since then, but sort of give us, some memories of stuff that you learned or that stick out.
Yeah, look, I'll start with playing for Kelly. I think she had a way to make, I think this is what great coaches do, right? You can't really put a exact pinpoint on it, but they've got a way of making you want to play for them and kind of inspiring you to go your hardest and to play your hardest and do your best, because a compliment from Kelly means the world, and getting a high five from the coaching staff, meant the world. But, it was a supportive environment. It was encouraging. It was really, really competitive, between players. And we were crazy people, even in practice drills and things like that. But she promoted that competitiveness. And just, you could see how hard they worked, and it made you want to work hard as well. So that was kind of playing for her, and I think that I walked into a team that just had so much confidence, and it wasn't an arrogance or a cockiness. It was confidence in their ability, and confidence because we'd done the work, and kind of year after year, that confidence grew, especially by my senior year. We went undefeated, and we walked onto that national championship field just knowing we were going to win. And it was almost an expectation. Now as a coach, I'm like, wow, that's crazy to win 4 in a row.
It is.
That's really hard to do, but as players, it was just the norm. And, you never spoke about it. At the beginning of the year, you never kind of said. It was kind of just a thing that you knew we're going to be there at the end. We're going to be competing for a national championship, and, we're going to work our butts off to get there. But it was just kind of an expectation thing, and that confidence, I think, and the belief that we had was a big part in why we were successful. I think when you look at the evolution of lacrosse, when I look back now, I mean, it was a totally different game to what we're playing and what I'm coaching now, in terms of even, starting the center draw. There was a lot more people in the draw area, and then everyone could run in at the same time. No free movement. I came in the year after women's lacrosse added boundaries, which, thank God, because as a kid coming over, we played with boundaries. I'm like, wait, how can you play a sport without a perimeter? So they just added that. It was still 7-on-7, but yeah, just not as free flowing, I would say. But I think we was for our era, we were still playing a really, really high level of lacrosse, and a really forward thinking version of lacrosse, in terms of, 05 was the first time I think women's lacrosse had seen that backer defense that they played in the 05, championship, where they were pressuring the ball and making offenses uncomfortable. That had never been done before. I think Northwestern was probably one of the first teams that did lines like the men do, subbing in lines, subbing on the fly, things like that, rather than just having middies who run the whole game. That was, I think, largely in part to Scotty and what he brought from the men's side. So I think that, even though lacrosse was a little bit behind where it is now, I think we were really, for our era, pushing the envelope of what was possible.
Well, no doubt, because the players, from that era are still playing and are still some of the best in the world, even though you guys are maybe past your prime. There's so many, it seems like. How many Tewaaraton winners came out of Northwestern?
There's a few. I think, there's a lot. I looked at the list the other day, actually, for something completely off topic. But, I think there's a ton. And it just goes to, in the era that we were really winning championships, it goes to show that she was developing players as well. And we were learning the game. We were learning how to play. And you can also see that, the passion that we all have for it by how many people are coaching.
Oh my God.
One tree that I think is always spoken about when, you speak about Kelly is how many people are coaching, whether it be head or assistant coaches. So that love for the game was really ingrained in a lot of us.
Well, when I met you, you were the assistant at Colorado, and it was a full-on Northwestern takeover of Boulder, Colorado, with you and Colleen McGarity, and for coaching for a new head coach, Ann Elliott. Did you guys all come together from that staff? Like, how did that come together, and what was that experience like, building a program from scratch?
Yeah. So first question, like, Annie got that job, and I was coaching at Towson at the time, and sort of, I remember half jokingly said to her when they announced that Boulder was adding, I was like, oh, this would be great. You get the head coaching job and I'll come join you as an assistant, because living in Colorado was always a dream of mine.
Yep.
And then, as it happens, a few weeks later, she texted me and she's like, well, were you serious? And so I went out there, and then Colleen McGarity was just graduated, was working in Chicago in insurance at the time, and, wasn't loving the real world. And we were able to lure her from working in an office out into Colorado. So that was one of the best experiences I've ever had, getting to build a program from scratch, literally having a hand in everything, from which facility on campus we were going to play in, where our offices were going to be, what our uniforms were going to be. That first year we didn't have a lot to do. So it was a lot of just kind of planning and watching a lot of lacrosse. Luckily for me, a lot of skiing as well in my spare time, which was awesome. But as that, the first class rolled in, it was a really unique experience to coach 21 freshmen. It was, they were clueless. Me and Colleen definitely acted like they're seniors. We sat them down and we're like, all right, this was usually stuff that your seniors tell you, but we're going to give you a list of like do's and do nots. I'll never forget, we turned up to Denver for our first fall ball game. We get there, we didn't have any balls, because no one, we didn't think we had to tell them, but who was going to tell them, right? Like, we had to tell them literally everything, and, embarrassingly have to go and ask the Denver coaching staff, can we borrow their balls? Like, just learning lessons from day to day, and but so rewarding to see, for me to see that class. I coached them for 2 years before I moved on, but I was actually there in their senior year. I was on the Northwestern coaching staff at that point, and they beat us. So to kind of see them, it was, obviously I was coaching for Northwestern, so I wanted to win. But, for me, it was a little, at the same time, rewarding to see them come so far in 4 years and be beating, top dogs in the competition was, it was rewarding for me to know that we recruited them and coached them in their early years. And, Colorado will always hold a special place in my heart, just because, we were the ones who started it, and we're there for 3 years of my life.
Totally. And I remember I was actually at that game. I went to that.
Game
in Colorado. Yeah. And the Colorado goalie had like 19 saves.
Yeah. Overtime. It was a wild one.
So then you went back to Northwestern. You decided, for a while there, you were going to get out of coaching. I think you went home, and then you came back and started coaching at Northwestern, back to your alma mater. How different was it, to be back years later, to coach and to be, on the staff of Kelly instead of, playing for her?
Yeah, it was, it was a great experience to be, as, I've only ever spent time at Northwestern as a player, when you really don't know what goes on behind the scenes at all. You kind of just turn up to the field and, you think your coaches have nothing to do, and, the athletic department doesn't really exist because the world revolves around you, and that's not really the case. So it was really a really rewarding and really cool experience to kind of go back, and people were still there who were there when I was playing. So to be co-workers with them and colleagues with them was really fun. And, just learning from Kelly and Scotty, and, Tim McCormick was there at the time, and we got to share an office, which was awesome. Him and I get along really, really well.
Yep.
So him and I to pick each other's brains, and, to pick the brain of Kelly and Scotty, and just kind of see, I think everyone, if they could, would love to coach at their alma mater and see them succeed. So for me, it was really great also to connect with that generation of players. I think you get 6, 7, 8 years removed, and you sort of lose touch with the program a little bit and not know the players. So for me, one of the most rewarding parts was coming in and just getting to reconnect with this era of Northwestern players, and get to work with some great players. Working with Selena Lasota was really fun. Unfortunately, she was injured for the majority of the year I was there, but we built a really good relationship, and to be able to mentor her and help her through it. And it was really rewarding, really fun. I'm glad it was only for a short time, but I'm glad I got to do it, even though it was for only one season.
So it was shorter than you probably expected, and all of a sudden
Yes.
you're getting offered one of the best jobs in the country, who also happens to be an arch rival of your alma mater.
Yes.
So now you're at the University of Michigan, and you're sitting in an office right now that I'm looking at in the view, and you've got really some of the best facilities. I took a nice tour of it last year, and man, unbelievable commitment to lacrosse at the University of Michigan. So talk to us about, give us the state of the union at Michigan and how everything's going.
Yeah, look, it's surreal to be sitting in this chair. I say that to, recruits and to people all the time. Again, we talked about how I got here and starting in Australia. I think, as a young Aussie, to be sitting in this chair, it really is, I have to pinch myself. And, for the longest time, I didn't think I wanted to be a head coach, just because of, I think I was immature there for a while, and scared of the commitment, and, just a little bit, head coaching is a full-time job, 24/7 round the clock. And I didn't think I'd be interested in it. But, now, as I was going through the interview process at Michigan, it really kind of hit home that I think I'm actually, I know I'm now interested in this, and I think I'd be pretty good at it, and I'm passionate about coaching. And so, here I am. But it is really surreal for me to be in this seat and in this position. I feel really lucky. But things here are great. It's been, year one was, I was just trying to keep afloat. I think no one can prepare you for your first year of coaching. You're getting hit from all angles, from the players, from your coaching staff, from the people. You have to go from being an assistant coach to a manager of people, and you're answering to a lot of people. So I think first year I got through it, and then I was happy to get through it. And, we managed to win a nice game at the end of that year. And last year I really felt like I found my groove a little bit as a coach, and I'm still learning, every single day. But things here, they're great. I guess when you look at the program and like you said, the support that Michigan puts behind all their sports, whether it's football or basketball, which obviously everyone knows about, but, women's lacrosse, we get as much resources or as many resources as some of the, biggest teams on campus. It's incredible the resources they put behind us and the support that they put behind us for us to succeed. So I often tell recruits, if we don't do well, it's not on anyone else except for me. It's and that's the way I'd want it. It's up to me to coach the team effectively because I've got all the resources I need to do that. So if we don't do well, it means I'm not doing something right, which is, the way I want it. The team itself, I'm really, really excited for this year. We returned almost everybody from last year. And obviously last year was a breakout year for the program. I think it was, we expected to be better than we were the year before. But even for me, I was a little, when I sit back and actually evaluate it, I have to kind of, admit like, wow, that was, probably exceeded expectations.
And so that was a top 10 finish with a home game in the NCAA tournament, correct?
Yeah, ended up with an 8 seed in the tournament. So got to, not only made the Big Ten tournament for the first time, but made the NCAA tournament for the first time and hosted. Unfortunately bowed out in a second round game to Denver. But just, the team last year was incredible. We tested them week to week. We threw a lot at them. We challenged them after every game, win or loss, to get better. And they answered every challenge that we threw at them and just kept believing. As we kept winning and getting stronger and stronger, they kept believing. And obviously we were peaking at the right time towards the end of the year, and we're beating some people we'd never beat before. So that was exciting. And what's exciting this year is that we don't really lose too many players. So I had a couple of weeks of fall practice already, and we're definitely looking the best we ever have at this point in the year. We look fast, we look stronger, we look just a bit more knowledgeable IQ-wise. That first year it would take us maybe 3 weeks to get through, simple concepts, and now it's taken us one practice. So, we have not skipped over any of the fundamentals, where we pride ourselves on really teaching and breaking down the fundamentals of the game. And making sure the IQ is there and we're speaking the same language, and we're really teaching and watching a lot of film and getting those fundamentals right. And, we spent a lot of time on that last year, and it's translating to this year and letting us evolve into doing, a bit more creative, things on the field.
So very different challenge to build a culture like you did from scratch at Colorado, and to inherit a culture and have to rebuild. How did you do that, and how are you doing that?
Yeah, I think, we came into a program that definitely needed some changes. They'd had a losing record for 4 years in a row. So the, morale was a little, I guess, down. And I think the team itself they'd become used to losing, which is never a position you want to be in. They've become okay with losing. But on the flip side, I think they just graduated their inaugural class, so they graduated a lot of players. So we inherited a group that really hadn't seen much playing time and that were eager for change. I think, there was no pushback on us coming in, no reluctancy. They knew a change needed to happen, and they were really fired up to meet our standards, to meet our expectations, and to do what we were asking of them. So, I kind of equate what we walked into similar to a Colorado situation whereby, I thought of that first year as having 35 freshmen. And no one, whether you're a senior or a freshman, really knew what we were talking about when we were explaining things, when we were breaking things down. So everyone had a clean slate and was learning things, together, which was, when you look at it now, your freshmen come in and they're quite significantly behind, which wasn't there in that first year because everyone was going through it together. So that was really great. They were eager for change, which was awesome. And it was really focusing on the culture piece and what my standards and my expectations were, which, are some of the things I've probably already talked about, but, having a good attitude, being a really hard worker, that's something that, I pride myself on, working hard and being disciplined. Again, having a good attitude, bringing the energy to practice, and being a good teammate and putting the team before yourself above all else. And those are things that, as a player, I live by, as a person, I live by, and that I expect, our team to buy into as well. And they have, they've really bought into our values, our expectations, we're big on holding people accountable. But then we move on, big on teaching lessons and when we can and when we have to. But for the most part, the group we're working with is just awesome. A great group of girls. And it's, I think that's hard to come into a team that you didn't recruit, but I think we were really lucky in the sense that we inherited really great people, first and foremost, with great attitudes and who want to learn and want to get better. And, it's trended in that direction as they've gotten to know, myself and the coaching staff better and better. They're starting to now hold each other accountable to those standards, and they know now what being a Michigan lacrosse player entails.
The idea of holding each other accountable is so huge. I was recently on the road watching a bunch of Division I men's practices, and I went to Yale, and Andy Shea at Yale has done this, and I was pretty blown away by the level of intensity and accountability being, represented by players to players.
Right.
The coaches kind of said, "All right, this is what we're doing. Let's go," and then the players, they were on it. And if guys didn't do what they were supposed to do,
right,
I'm not sure if it would go over that well on, women's lacrosse. But, it was like F-bombs, you better do that. And it was kind of, the concept is there though. How do you get accountability and get kids to step up and say what they're thinking and that they know needs to be done, because this is how, in the end, great teams end up becoming great.
Well, and that's still a learning process for us, right? And I think it's even more difficult on the women's side, because I think girls are a little bit more tentative to say something to another girl, because you might hurt their feelings or you might get thought of as mean. So we're really trying to just teach, our players that, look, once you cross the white line, like, you got to be on, and you're allowed to say something to that person if they're not holding their weight. Say it in the correct tone, and say it in a tone that's going to be, received well, and know your audience. But it's no reflection on you as a person. They're not insulting your personality. They're telling you to go harder for a ground ball. And, we've really encouraged that communication. And, once you step off the field, you're back to being buddies and kind of leave it in the dust. And that's, again, something that I was really I quickly learned as a kid, because, again, you're playing with people in their 20s and 30s. They're telling you what's up. Like, they're saying, like, don't turn over the ball, or you've got to be here. And I was told that. So I learned to be pretty thick-skinned from a young age. And it's just teaching them, again, like you said, if you can have that player-to-player accountability, so the coaches can kind of sit back and do the bigger picture stuff, it's massive.
Other things that you do specifically to help develop that beyond talking about it?
It's, any opportunity we have to point it out, we'll do that. And it might probably, it usually isn't in front of a group. It's usually to an individual. Currently we're doing a leadership group for the fall to try and foster these types of, to teach leadership, but to be, to have a little bit more point people to go to for certain things. But certainly if coaches see something happening, we'll go speak to an individual and say, hey, look, that wasn't good enough. You knew it. Say something to her next time. So it's not calling out a specific person in front of the whole group, but it's, just giving people little tidbits on, when it's appropriate to say something and what maybe could have been said. But I'm not one to really stand in front of a group and preach and talk about this stuff. It's more when I see it in action and actioning things every day. That's kind of how we foster the culture that we're wanting.
Got it.
The Philocrosophy podcast is brought to you in part by the JM3 Lacrosse Academy. This 10-week online program is designed to teach cutting-edge lacrosse skills and IQ. Athletes will learn dozens of new techniques, creative drills, X's and O's, and most importantly, how to integrate it all into their game. To learn more or start getting better today, go to www.jm3sports.com/academy.
So let's talk a little bit about player development. You talk a lot about, your desire to break it down and build it up, the fundamentals, and your passion for the game and learning. And you talk about learning picks and flips and, all of these skills, that fascinate you and me. And one of the reasons why we love talking lacrosse, but how do you go about teaching this, and how do you sort of bring people from, this level of fundamental to the level of elite skill?
Yeah, good question. I think it's not something that there's enough time for in a 2-hour practice. If we're talking practice specifically, we do a lot of, especially right now in the fall, positional breakdowns. So we may start with, stick work and ground balls every day, transition usually majority of the days of the week. And then we'll usually go into a positional setting where it's either defenders and middies at one end and the attackers, or the attackers and middies at one end with the defenders at the other. And, we'll typically in these sessions be breaking down a specific skill or concept. And then what we've been doing this fall is going straight into a live setting and seeing how that translates, and really, for us, I think my coaching staff is, I think you have to be a good teacher to be able to teach it. That's kind of sounds simple, but you've got to be able to do it yourself, break it down and show how it's meant to be done, and really educate and teach in a way that relates to these kids, and to really break it down in a way that, makes sense to them. So that's sort of how we do it. Come together, see how it looks. A big thing for our offense this year is just, all right, let's pick one aspect, whether it's picking or, backdoor cuts or whatever it is. Let's go break it down into positional, talk about it in maybe a scripted, more skeleton setting, come back. Again, the free play concept, just tell them, go play 5v5 or 6v6 or, eventually build up to 7v7 and just give them those little pieces of information and try and let them look for the opportunities to use it in that live play setting. That's sort of in our 2-hour practice window. But outside of that, we have a really, really big culture here of individual work. And, if you look at our calendar on any given day, it is full from top to bottom with different coaches, myself included, out on the field with the players breaking down skills. So there's some that, might be freshman players or first year or second year players that just need shooting technique. And so they'll be doing shooting technique that day. There'll be some that are a bit more advanced and are getting more into different kinds of dodges or feeding off of a dodge or, different progressions of dodge, step back, re-attack, whatever it is. It could be anything, defensive footwork. But going back to the resources we have here, we have a director of operations, we have a video coordinator that kind of takes a lot of the load off of our plate for us to just spend the whole day on the field. So, again, today's Wednesday, we were out for 2 hours, this morning, and then all of us turned around and at, 10 a.m. we were back on the field with all 3 of us were out there at once, just breaking down skills and getting the mechanics right. So that they, when we build it back into the practice setting, then it translates. But again, I can't tell you how many hours a week we're spending out on the field as coaches, with individual players or groups of players.
So awesome. And by the way, it's such an amazing learning opportunity for you and the coaches to coach the skills that much, isn't it?
Oh, it's huge. And you learn, and I think you learn something about yourself every time you do it. And, you may do it with one kid and they don't pick it up really well. You might change your technique the next time. And then they get it. And you're like, all right, I'm going to use that back with that kid. And even today, I explained just a simple split dodge, kind of 3 different ways. We finally got one way that stuck. And we're like, right, forget everything else I said. Just focus on that. And so you're constantly learning about yourself as a teacher and, what works and what doesn't. And it might not be the same for each kid.
There are just so many things to learn, too, when it comes down to all the different ways to dodge. I mean, you think of dodging, you think of split dodges, but
sure.
You got the beginning of the dodge, and then that's the wind-ups,
widening out,
getting close to the double threat, or then you got the middle of the dodge. You got all your rollbacks and your cutbacks and your hesitation moves and finalizers and pop outs, and then you got the end of the dodge, which has a million ways to get shot.
Yeah,
and that's just dodging.
There's a lot, and it's I think again if. I don't know how much my players maybe watch, but again, you learn so much of that just by watching people. I was watching the PLL championship this weekend, and I just was watching it, getting ideas for myself as a player, getting an idea for different plays we could put in, just different ideas for stick work drills we could do. Like it's, you can learn a lot of that by watching. And as you said, there's a lot of skills to be taught in a 4-year career, but hopefully little by little, you can at least get a good, we call it tools in the toolbox. You got to have tools in the toolbox. If you get stopped one way, to be able to, have a counter move and to be able to get out of a situation or make something out of nothing or whatever it is. So,
tools in the toolbox, it's such a great analogy. But I always find that so many times kids, you teach them and they've got, a ton of tools in the toolbox, but all they really use is their hammer,
Yeah.
And this is, it's universal. It's men's and women's lacrosse. And I've this is why the whole free play stuff that I've been really on lately. Right. And I've been on it for a couple of years, but I've just been dialing it up and up and up because what I'm noticing with the players that I work with, and I coach a high school girls team now, but I also still coach boys. I kind of coach and look at it all the time. But I also know that over the course of time, I kind of did what you're doing. I broke down every imaginable skill and concept and all this. And we created all the tools in the toolbox, but I was like, I think there's something too, like you said, letting the kids go out and play and try it and figure it out, because it has more to do with your processing of what's happening around you and the decisions that you make.
Yeah.
And, so a player has to see what's happening. I have the ball. How's my defender playing me? Where are the other defenders? Where are my teammates? Where is the open space? Where's the goal? How much time left in the shot clock?
Right.
Who's yelling at me? All these things are happening. And then you have to make decisions.
Yep.
And then you have to execute the decisions with techniques.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes we spend so much time on the technique and it becomes diminishing returns. Like, you have to show the technique in certain cases, although there's arguments to say that maybe you could learn a technique without being taught. I think that's possible.
Yeah.
Have you ever done something in a game where you're like, holy cow, how did I do that? I've done that before.
I probably have.
So, this is like the yin and the yang, the push and the pull of teaching versus letting them play.
Well, I think that was a big thing that's kind of we're seeing success this year, is because I think last year we taught so much about just the structure of the offense and things kind of like talking about like how to create space, fading versus a cut through, fading into spaces, dodge pass, simple kind of concepts of broader picture offense.
Yeah.
And by the end of the season, I'll admit we became predictable. Our offense had at first thought in my head was meant to be this really multi-dimensional thing. By the end of the year, we were robotic. And so, that's been a big thing for us. But because we spent so much time on those concepts last year, well, we're now going and we're teaching, whether it's picking on ball or whatever it is, like a simple skill that we now break down, and now we go and put it back into the live situation. Now they've got that IQ piece for the most part. It's not perfect, but they've got, they know when it's their time to dodge versus when they should transfer the ball versus when they should fade into a position or cut through or whatever it is. Now they've got those, that awareness, that now it's a bit more simple for them to implement the skills that we're kind of going back and teaching. So it's kind of the push-pull, yin-yang, what do you teach first?
Yeah.
And for us, it's been a long 2 years of getting the IQ down. And we've got very specific, language and very specific, last year it was very specific rules, and now the rules have sort of gone away, and it's all right, be creative within this structure. Which is, again, teaching, this week it was one concept, one like specific skill. The week before it was something else. And all right, guys, now go do it. And it is, you kind of see that, they're athletes, they get it. They, it may not be the cleanest, and you have to, fix things along the way and tweak things, but they'll at least try it. And they at least, for the most part, know, when is the appropriate time to do it. And it's just kind of fixing maybe the backside and the rest of it. And, lucky it's a long fall.
The late, great Dave Huntley always used to talk about everything that happens outside of around 12 yards in front of the goal is all just noise. And I kind of, it's funny because you look at, you think about offense, and I remember growing up as a coach, and, you're trying to spread them out. But, in the end, the defenses aren't going to just get spread out. And in the end, running by somebody is important, but there's a million people that are so fast, but yet they can't get their shots off. And it seems like, the ability, and women's, now I coach girls lacrosse, and to be able to be good in the 8, be able to get shots off. I mean, how many times have you watched, girls, high school girls catch it, and they're like 3 yards from the crease, but there's someone on them, and they run out.
They don't shoot it. Yep.
Like, you gotta shoot it around, and but how much, and this sort of is right back to the whole box lacrosse. That's why Dave Huntley, he's a box, he's a Canadian. Do you try to train your players to have these sort of box skills? Are you recruiting that? And, you mentioned two-man game a couple of times in this conversation.
Yeah, like we're certainly, I've watched a lot of stuff you do and been at clinics and things, and it's something that we mess around with. I wouldn't say it's at the forefront of our offense. At this point, you look at a team like Northwestern, and they're heavily using it, right? And they're really executing it at a high level too. And you see how much it can produce for you, in multiple different ways, on ball, off ball. So it's certainly, we've got players that I think we're working a little bit more basic and broad picture right now. But, the simple, flips and two-man game on ball and having the awareness on the backside, certainly I think it's not something we're diving completely into yet in terms of, the double threat and really just working in a small space. But, within what we're trying to do, once you get into small spaces, helping our players figure out what to do, and not just be able to beat someone with a 10-yard run-up. How can you manipulate the defender on your approach, kind of like you touched on before, to get them on their heels and beat them in a 3-yard, distance with the re-attacks and the hesitations and the, exactly, like looking back, pump fakes, whatever it is. So there's certainly elements without kind of going too far in that direction.
Well, you have a lefty on your team, at least last year you did, that could play that way, that's for sure. And she played around people. And, I don't know how many goals she had, but I bet she had a lot.
Yeah, she had a great year. Caitlin Muir, she was an upstate New York kid. And she, again, talk about tools and toolbox. We are just, and Adam is, primarily working with her, at least twice a week, I'd say, at just those different things. You have to get stopped topside. What are your options if they're shutting off the underneath? What are your options now? I'm working with her on a feeding game. But certainly she had a couple of really nice goals. I think it was our Northwestern game where she was almost stationary and just rock her and shot at sidearm. So
it was sick.
She's just, again, evolving, and we're happy she's only a junior.
Well, it's in men's and women's lacrosse, the opportunity to get to a spot on the field, somewhere between the goal line and the elbow, right on the horn there. You post up there, you can feed, you're really close.
Yeah.
They kind of have to slide to you, but if they don't, how do you stop somebody? It's not like you can beat the snot out of them and push them out physically.
Right.
I mean, you can resist, and I'm not saying it's not physical, but but you can't do that much without help.
Such an advantageous position, and it's again,
you must have dominated that part of the field when you played.
Yeah, and you know what? Like I was never a really good dodger. I don't think it was. I could score when I had to, but I was way more a feeder, right? Like I love feeding. If a defender met me on goal line extended, I would run up to them like I don't know what to do. And towards my junior and senior year, I developed some moves, but I could never master the inside roll. It was just something I had a mental block with. It's something I've worked on since, but I had the ability there. I think more to at least perceive to defenses that I was an offensive threat, and then be able to step back and feed. And to be able to do both. And we're working really heavily with our kind of ex-attackers on getting to that spot and be in the middle of your dodge, be able to feed at any second, and obviously then wrap your hands and dodge physically and get to that spot where you can shoot sidearm, over the shoulder, roll back, question mark, whatever it is. But it is, and if you can develop all those tools in that area, you're going to be really hard to stop.
One of the things that I talk about with, as it relates to Dave Huntley, is he had put together these stats on MLL lacrosse talking about two-man game. And the stats suggest that there's better scoring efficiencies with two-man than there is with isolation. And you sort of say to yourself, well, why is that? And I guess it's because when you involve communication and decision-making on defense, it makes it a little bit harder. But I also think, you're bringing another defender to the ball, and that sort of is a little counterintuitive.
Right.
But what you're really doing in so many ways is if you can break through, now all of a sudden you have to slide. And now instead of having 5 covering 6, you've got 4 covering 5.
3. Yeah.
And if you have a 3-man side and you break through, now it's 3 covering 4. And so it takes more skill, I think. But it's kind of an interesting concept. Yeah.
Oh, I totally agree. Especially in women's lacrosse, you're playing 7v7. So if you can, bring one away from the backside and execute efficiently, with a pick on ball, or whether it's a screen or a flip or whatever it is, then yes, you're at least dragging one more away from the big clump of people that's typically on the backside in our game. Adam and I have talked a lot already this year. I wish we played 6v6 offensively. And then our defensive coach is like, no way, 7v7 all the way. But, trying to figure out what to do with that 7th attacker is
You guys play man or zone?
We're man. Yep, we're big on just kind of athleticism, stopping people 1v1. We have a zone. We haven't typically used it. Defense has been the backbone of our team for the past 2 years. Really, I think we're number 6 in the nation last year in goals against. So, locking it down. And, again, I think zone concepts come in when you're sliding and you're man down on the backside. So it's teaching a really solid team fundamental defense within, the 1v1, lots of communication. For the first time this year, that's our least experienced side of the ball. So it's kind of getting the freshmen confident in talking and what to say, and getting veterans now working a bit more with some younger players. So that's been a heavy emphasis for us already in the fall, and it will continue to be. But yeah, man to man, we look for athletes, and we want to be able to stop people 1v1. First and foremost.
Yeah, and but there's a lot. What would you say the percentage of man versus zone on your schedule?
Oh, last year I thought was heavy zone.
Seems like
this year, when I'm just looking at it, I think it's probably heavy zone out of conference. But I would say the majority of the Big Ten's playing man-to-man at the moment. So, well, at least they were last year. Who knows what we'll see this year. But, yeah, we see both. In the beginning of the year, we offensively handled zones pretty well. And, that at the end of the year ultimately was our kryptonite. So, we're definitely working on concepts offensively to beat a zone with a bit more movement and cutting and drags and carries and all those kinds of things. So, but yeah, if we can, hopefully the out of conference schedule will help us with that. If we ever see it, in conference.
Right. Well, it seems like in girls lacrosse, not women's lacrosse, you don't see as much of the man up type of play as kids grow up playing. They pretty much grow up more man to man, and maybe pressure, maybe not, but it's a lot more man to man. Maybe there's slides, maybe not, but it's not like it seems like there's not even the man up. Like you just don't see people playing 3-on-2s and 4-on-3s. How many times, in men's lacrosse, they work on a box against 3, rotating and learning how to, like you said, drag and carry and throw back and skip and wind up and use all that, slow down. It's counterintuitive a little bit in women's lacrosse because it's such a speed game and everything is go, 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 go. Working on it yourselves because you kind of have to be able to do that stuff. You're sort of, sort of said, hey, we're working on these concepts of drags and carries. And what are some of the things you do to try to develop zone type of concepts or man?
Exactly kind of like you said. We're working a lot. And again, things that I've kind of learned from you and seen you do. Just simple 3v2 passing drills, 4v3 passing drills to warm up our sticks. Just getting comfortable with defenders and learning defensive rotations in those settings. Doing a bit more man up on cages, on cage, again, just to learn how they're rotating and stopping a lot and pointing things out, because people could do things once and you might think that they knew what they were doing, but happens again the next time and they don't do it. So we're big on kind of stopping and talking through it, whether it was a positive or a negative. But yeah, even again, we've had 2 weeks of practice and I think we've probably done at least 5 days of 3v2 or 4v3 passing just to warm up, and it's translated really well into into drills that we've been doing, whether it's a ground ball to cage, as a progression or fast breaks or whatever it is. Just getting comfortable with a defender in your face and being able to, pump fake one way and move the ball, or look one way, move, we're really trying to hone in on the no look passes and things like that. And you realize that they haven't been taught it before. And so it's something that, again, I naturally do, but been playing for a long time. So it's breaking down those skills in just a very controlled environment and then putting it in again to a live drill and pointing out, what we did, what was good about it, what was bad about it. And, as you're saying, the man up stuff, around the cage, whether it's starting 2v1, building up to a bit more small sided and, just honing in on the man up to learn how to manipulate your defender and how to manipulate the space, how to move with the ball, the body mechanics of what a drag is, what a carry is, what a throwback is, all those kinds of things is what we've really been focusing on for these first 2 weeks.
And when you say 3-on-2, 4-on-3 passing, you're referring to like keep away, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Groups of 5, whatever it is, set up in a triangle, just exactly, keep away. Defense is working and offense is working to not drop the ball or not turn it over.
Right. Free play, that's very much like free play. Keep away is, because it's not scripted, right? It's you can have them execute certain movements, but you just never know how the defense is going to play. They're making decisions. They're processing who's open.
Exactly.
Really cool.
I got, the same as I think one of the guys I was listening to on yours too. It's like soccer does it a lot, right? I think they call it the rondo. rondo drills, and that goes as big as the other day we were doing 7 on the outside, 4 in the middle. So it's just, again, that ball zipping around quickly and thinking about your next pass before you catch the ball, things like that. Just, again, that's the stuff you used to play as a kid, right? Like we call it piggy in the middle. I think you guys call it monkey in the middle. Just kind of trying to get the ball back and trying to keep the ball away from someone and just learning skills throughout.
Monkey in the middle. Can't beat it.
Right.
All right, last topic. Talk to us a little bit about your philosophy on recruiting.
Yeah. Look, first and foremost is I'm looking for obviously great athletes, but great people. I'm centering our program around people who I think can come in and buy into our values and can contribute to those values and not have a negative effect on them. So I got to feel good about you as a person, as a family, your attitude and your work ethic. I think that stuff can really show on the field. You can really get a sense for someone and who they are just by watching them on the field, how they react to mistakes, how they interact with their teammates and their coaches, what they do, when the game ends. Do they go straight off on their own or do they hang out with their team? Things like that. So that's things that I look for because, no matter how talented you are, you got to fit in. You got to fit into to who I am and what I'm going to ask of you, and you got to fit into the team because culture will always be first for me. Outside of that, we're looking for athletes. I think obviously as we get better and better as a lacrosse program, I think we're attracting natural lacrosse players, but we really love athleticism, big, strong, tall attackers, just with some size. I think we play a pretty physical style of lacrosse. So we want people who aren't going to get knocked around. The Big Ten is you're playing against monsters. So there's tough physical defenders. So we need tough physical attackers, and obviously vice versa. We need strength and athleticism across the board and toughness. First and foremost, game sense, obviously we hope is there and stick skills. But I think, again, we can teach that. I think when we look at players, we would much rather take the athletic, really hard worker, not afraid to get hit, going hard for every ground ball, going hard every game, rather than the kind of finesse player. I think that sometimes you might need that finesse player, but for us, for the most part, we're looking for big strong players that can play both ends. Or if we're looking for an attacker, it's shiftiness, stick work, knowing when to move the ball versus knowing when to dodge. And sort of, at the end of the day, it comes down to how hard you work, your attitude, and being passionate about Michigan. I want people to come to Michigan because they want to come to Michigan, and they're passionate about what we have to offer and passionate about coming and starting something.
It seems like this class, I haven't actually recruited a class in a while, but I've sort of just been watching men's and women's lacrosse, and I was a part of recruiting when you signed kids in the fall.
Yeah.
Moved up and up and up and up and up, and all of a sudden you're committing freshmen. And then all of a sudden, the class of 2020, was the last class that was recruited as 8th graders and freshmen. Here in the class of 2021, I've made this statement a few times. I think this is the most under-evaluated class in history of college lacrosse because people really weren't paying close attention to this class until this summer, maybe last fall, but the fall is almost a wash. I mean, it's like 6 days, right? So
right. A lot of them get washed out on crappy fields, and
literally it was washed out last year. And then the summer, there's so many kids and so many events. It's just, it's not even reasonable to think that you're going to be able to know the details about players without having watched them play a lot. And everyone just kind of watches a half a game here and a half a game there. And at the end, hopefully, you might have seen some teams more than others. But there's a lot of kids and a lot of events. And so do you believe that this process is going to take a lot longer than ever before as it relates to, the time frame and the –
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, I think there's probably, the upper – I won't even say a third, the upper maybe 100th of kids, that are being really heavily recruited at the moment.
Sure.
And they'll find their homes early, I think. And then I think programs will get to a point where all right, well, we focus so heavily on these girls for the whole summer. And now we're going to go back to the drawing board. And I hope it does, in all honesty. I got to the end, even I was in the summer feeling frantic. I was like, I've got to get last evaluations on kids. And it's like, well, hang on a sec. It's not the last time you're ever going to see them, but I think people do. We've slowed down the process to a certain extent, but then it's September 1 and then it's go, go, go again. And how fast can we commit and how fast can we commit kids? Right. I can't say I love it because I think
it's hard because you don't want to take someone you don't know that well.
Yeah, exactly. And when you talk about recruiting great people, how much can you really know about somebody? From one visit or a couple of phone calls. So it's certainly tough. I think that absolutely they're probably underrated. I think people are probably making decisions before they're ready, just because they're starting to feel antsy because the next program's committing people. But I hope it slows down. I hope that this fall coming up turns into another big evaluation period for the 21s this year, and people aren't skipping on to 22s. Because that's what I think it should be that way.
I bet it will. Yeah. I mean, I bet you next summer there's going to be more people looking at 21s than they looked at 20s this year. I mean, partly because they looked at 20s for 3 years. I mean, it's not like you haven't seen it.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's really interesting. I got a question for you. Do you recruit close defenders, or do you recruit middies and make them into defenders, or a little bit of both? Or what?
It depends. If we're trying to get a close defender, they have to be pretty good. Otherwise we'll just take a midfielder. So I think it's harder when you go and watch. You don't see very many of them in the women's game. I think you see some, and there's a few out there that maybe know what they're doing and who actually are communicating and have vision and have good off-ball body positioning and are able to direct and have the qualities that you're looking for. But I think they're far and few between. If we see them, absolutely we'll go after them. But I think outside of that, we feel pretty confident in let's get a strong two-way midi that maybe isn't as refined offensively, and we can focus on them as a defensive midi.
Yeah, and there's no question, you're going to feel confident that you're going to be able to develop that player. There is though the mentality, of playing defense, and some kids are like, well, I mean, I'd rather be scoring goals, and
right,
and because they kind of grow up being able to do that. But I also think it's so hard, like I listened to Colleen McGarity talk about, how important it is to play pressure defense if you're running a club program so that people can actually see your defenders.
Yeah, and see how you play. Yeah, exactly.
If you've got some athleticism, and if you can be disruptive, rather than you look at these totally packed in, pick up at the 8, don't go behind the net,
Yep.
Maybe you can play good defense that way, but it's certainly not a great way to showcase your
No, exactly. Tough to see what they're like. And totally agree with you on the mentality thing. Is we just had some positional meetings with each group, just kind of expressing our expectations, for that position and what it means to, the positional coaches to be, working with them and what they expect. And I just kind of said it to, I had the midi meeting yesterday, and it was like, you got to embrace the defense as much as you embrace the offense. You can't be one or the other. And then same as, the defensive meeting, it was, get angry, get fired up about being a defender, about being able to stop people. And it's such a mentality, such a mindset to want to be a good defender.
Do you guys play D middies, or do you guys play two-way middies, or both?
We have a mixture of both. Most of our middies are two-way, and then on a line, we typically have two ways and then an A midi, D midi as a third.
Two ways and a third specialist.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but do you are there teams that are subbing more than that and just trying to sub out 2 players or even
there
3?
Are, yeah.
Is it like, are you liable to give up transition, or is it possible to kind of not give up transition and be able to sub your players?
You got to be pretty good at it. Against certain transition teams, it wouldn't serve you well to run 2 off. We were doing it at the end of the year, and partly because we had some people that weren't good enough on offense, and we ended up running 2 D mids and 2 A mids, and 1 2-way on each line, and it worked out because the teams we were playing were doing the same thing.
Yeah,
it comes a little risky when you're playing a high-powered offense or a high-powered transition team, and you're trying to do that. But yeah, we've got 2 2-ways on each line.
Yep, got it. Awesome. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on this podcast and share with us the state of the union, your history with the game, and share your passion for it.
Yeah, thanks. Anytime. Appreciate it. Love talking lax.
Awesome. I'll be in touch.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Hannah. Take care.
The Philocrosophy podcast is brought to you in part by the JM3 Lacrosse Academy. This 10-week online program is designed to teach cutting-edge lacrosse skills and IQ. Athletes will learn dozens of new techniques, creative drills, X's and O's, and most importantly, how to integrate it all into their game. To learn more or start getting better today, go to www.jm3sports.com/academy.